Good day, everyone. Today we will tackle our first lesson in NVISI 1, the Ecological Foundation of Environmental Science. So we need to learn the ecological foundations of environmental science for us to appreciate more our environment. And if we value and appreciate our environment, we can be able to take care of it effectively and efficiently. So these are the topics included in this lesson one. First, we have the ecosystem concepts, the basic concepts um, that we have in ecology. We'll also tackle about the ecosystem structure, how does the ecosystem works, and ecosystem functions, what are the functions in the ecosystem, the energy flow and ecosystem, meaning how energy and matter are being transferred from one organism to another. And lastly, we'll talk about the biogeochemical cycles, which will be your reporting. So first, let's discuss first some basic concepts. The first that we have is about environmental awareness. So as per definition, this is having awareness of the value of the environment, the impacts of human behavior on it, and the importance of protecting it. Basically, it's just as the name itself. It's being aware of our environment. Say, for example, if we value our environment, we will not throw our garbage anywhere. We will keep our garbage and, say, for example, segregate them. So that small thing is showing that we are aware of our environment. Another example would be if we are conserving energy, such as conserving our water or conserving our electricity when not in use, turn off the lights when not in use, or turn off the water, the faucet when not in use. This is also an example of showing that we are aware of our environment and that we want to take care of it because our environment give us our resources, give us our food, our shelter, even our clothing. So everything that we have is coming from our environment. So thus we are ought to take care of it and be aware of the value of it. So another term is about environmental science. I believe these are part of your assignment. So environmental science is basically the study of the interaction of man with the natural environment. So environmental science is founded on ecological principles, and thus we can say that NVISI is under ecology. And the focus in environmental science is, the human beings as organisms and how do we interact with our natural living environment, with the abiotic and biotic factors, and how do we affect or influence our natural environment. So that leads us to another term, which is ecology, which is basically the study of how organisms interact with one another and their non-living environment. So ecology is somehow a major field of studying about the environment. It focuses broadly on organisms, different organisms interacting with each other and their non-living environment. And thus, we can say that environmental science is under ecology because it focuses on human beings. And well, in ecology, there is what we call the most basic functional unit in ecological principles. So, ecosystem can be defined as any unit that includes all organisms in each area interacting with the physical environment so that a flow of energy leads to a clearly defined trophic structure, biotic diversity, and material cycles within the system. In simple terms, we can say that an ecosystem consists of different organisms, such as living organisms. So we have plants, we have animals, we have bacteria and fungi. So they all make up an ecosystem. But um, we also consider the non-living environment as part of the ecosystem. So the ecosystem will not become complete without its non-living counterpart. So basically, it is the interaction, it is one functional unit that consists of the living organisms and the non-living environment they are, interacting within. So an example of an ecosystem is, let's say you have a garden at home. So in your garden you have your plants there. Well, of course, plants are maybe planted in the soil, and the soil would naturally contain minerals, nutrients that your plants need. So all of these things are part of the ecosystem. Not just that, but maybe your soil would also contain um, worms and other organisms, maybe bacteria and fungi, beneficial organisms that also helps your plant grow and develop. And in your garden, you might also have other organisms aside from your plants. Maybe some bird will visit your garden and get pollinate your flowers there or something like that. So all of those organisms are part of that ecosystem. And so we can consider your garden, your little garden, as one functioning ecosystem. And even us, human beings, we also benefit from that garden. Maybe you have vegetables or crops there that you eat, no? So you harvest your crops, and so you are also part of that ecosystem. Now let's focus more on the concepts that is in the ecosystem. Okay, so once again, an ecosystem includes organisms, populations, and communities, each influencing the properties of the others. So meaning these organisms, populations, communities, they interrelate in a cyclical, life-sustaining way through a regular provision of energy by the sun. So all of these organisms, living and non-living, they are arranged in a steady state dynamic balance, thus altering one part will affect other parts. So first, I have mentioned a while ago that as small as a garden can be called an ecosystem, but and we can also consider an ecosystem in a larger scale. Say for example, the marine ecosystem. So as big as the whole ocean community, we can actually call them an ecosystem. Why? Because all of the organisms here interrelate with each other, are interconnected with each other somehow. So for example, naatay gamay na isda sa ibabaw sa um, dagat, no? So there are different fishes nga nagapuyo there. Then kinsa may predator ano nila, so most probably larger fish. And then kaning mga larger fish kinsa man po'y predator ani nila, maybe sharks, which are um, living in, say for example, the middle part of the ocean. So kaning mga sharks, who are their predator, maybe their predators would be um, larger organisms. Pagid no? So, for example, giant octopus, which are living not really on the surface or the middle, but in the deep part of the ocean. And syempre, these large octopus, naapod na sila predator that maybe nagapuyo pod sa deepest, darkest part of the ocean. So in a sense, all of the organisms in this one marine ecosystem are interconnected with each other. Maybe not directly, but indirectly in a life-sustaining way. Kasi, for example, at the top of the predators, pag nangamatay na ni silang tanan, then they will become food for decomposers, which are small organisms, bacteria, fungi, or whatever. And these decomposers break down these dead organic material, and what do they do next? They actually return the nutrients back to the ocean. So kaning mga nutrients na break down through by decomposers will be used again by plants, which are in turn, plants are a source of food for the marine animals. So it's actually a cycle, just a cycle. So as we have mentioned a while ago that an ecosystem is one functional unit. So we are also not just referring to the food relationship of these organisms, no, but we are also considering their non-living environment. So as mo di sila magkuha og energy, diba they get their energy from the sun, or they get their energy or their nutrients from, the water and all of the dissolved oxygen in the water, or even carbon dioxide for that matter, or carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and so on and so forth. And thus, in an ecosystem, let's not forget about, the non-living counterpart. So that's an ecosystem. We can look at it on a micro level. We can also look at it in a larger scale. And we have said here that the ecosystem connotes obligatory relationship, interdependence, and causal relationship between and among the different habitats and niches of organisms. So what do we mean by this? When we say obligatory relationship, each organism has a role to play so that other organisms will survive. So that's like we are saying that they are interdependent with each other, they are interconnected. And thus, if you if something is to be altered in that ecosystem, then it will actually affect all of the other parts. So that's what we mean by it connotes obligatory relationship, interdependence, and causal relationship. Say, for example, in this ecosystem right here. So this example in your monitor, we have here the plant community. In this ecosystem na plant community, there is the lake. Maybe of course the lake would contain fishes, crabs, and other organisms, as well as dissolved oxygen, or even minerals and nutrients na naadara, no? We also have soil organisms and soil properties. We have the trees, we have the energy from the sun, and so on and so forth. So say for example, well, recently there are reports, no, or there are ano sa tawag kaning baha. Okay. So we have recently experienced heavy rainfalls. So nagabaha. So say for example, kaning sapa dere gibaha og maayo. Like grabe jud kayo ang baha. Nangaanod tanan, mga not really tanan, but nangaanod ang mga organisms and so on and so forth, minerals, nutrients, or whatever. So what do you think will happen to the rest of the community, since this is one functional ecosystem? So most probably, the answer for that is that mawala ang mga fish, no? Kaya syempre, mabaha man, maanod ang mga fish, or mga nutrients, and then maanod sila sa lain na parts. So what will happen is that katong ilang mga predators, like mga birds, say for example, na nagkakaon og fish, or other small organisms. So syempre, wala sila food. Not really wala, but the food will become scarce kay na anod naman. Or even the plant community here. So ang mga plant, they will not get enough nutrient from the water, from the soil, kay tungod gani because of the baha. So naanod ang topsoil, so naanod ang mga nutrients and um, minerals. And so if the plant community will have little to get from, little nutrients and minerals to get, then maybe some of them will not survive. So some of the plant community, mga matay. And very important ang plant community because they are producers, no? They serve as food for other organisms. So maunsa na lang po itong mga predator nila. So if gamay na lang ang plant community nga makasurvive, gamay na lang po itong, kumbaga, there will be competition of resources, and katong mga predators nila, maybe some of them will migrate to other ecosystem, some of them will not survive and mga matay. So that is what we mean by, in an ecosystem, it has a causal relationship. So kay nadaot man or nagbaha man, it actually not, did not just affect the fish community, no, but it also affected other communities such as mga birds, diri, mga plant, and all of their predators. So as you can see, an ecosystem is actually arranged in a steady state dynamic balance. It should have balance, no? And that's why if you alter some, like, even the most minute part in an ecosystem, it will actually um, affect all of the other organisms in that ecosystem, and not just this particular ecosystem, no. Asa man di ay mapadulong ang katong mga nutrients and minerals nga nga gibaha. So mapadulong to sila sa other ecosystem, and that could also affect that ecosystem, um in a way nga, say for example, pwede nga managhan na ang minerals and nutrients dito. Well, it could boom their population, but at the same time it might also have a negative impact. Like say for example na ay mga certain fish or snails or whatever nga mapadulong dito which is not native to that ecosystem. So it might become invasive species. So makambyoan na po itong mga organisms dito. And even in migration, say for example, ang mga bird, muhawa sila diri nga ecosystem because wala na sila makaon. So they will transfer to another ecosystem. So what will happen to that certain ecosystem wherein na ay migration of large number of birds? So makulang na po ilang food dito. Their ecosystem will actually be disrupted as well. So dili lang kay tungod na ay nahitabo nga issue diri nga ecosystem kanilang po siya ang maapektuhan. It will actually affect everything, no? Everything that takes part or is within that ecosystem and even outside that ecosystem. So it's very important that an ecosystem keeps its balance. Another concept in ecosystem is what we call a population. So as you can see in the illustration that we have here, this is an example of an organism. So of course, this is a deer. So if there's one deer, one pig, or one dog, or they are called an organism, or even human beings, we are organisms. But if we are grouped together with our same kind, mga kalahi nato, like this deer right here, na siya yung mga family members niya, na yung mama, na yung papa, na yung mga relatives, they become a population. No? They are called a population kasi population is a group of organisms of the same kind living in a particular location. So, kita ng mga tao nga nakapuyo diri sa makilala, we are considered one population, or mga tanang tao nga nagpuyo sa Philippines, we are a population. So same with organisms, no. Tanan ng mga deer or tanan ng mga baboy nga nagpuyo sa isa ka particular location, they are population. Now if there are several populations, meaning daghang klase-klase nga mga population living in a certain environment or in a particular area, we call them a community, or most specifically a biotic community. So we spell that as BIOTIC community. So biotic community. So again, pag when we say biotic community, it has several populations. Like in the picture, we have deers, we have zebras, we have uh, carabaos, we have birds, cheetah, and whatever living in a particular location or interacting in a particular location. They are called biotic community. But again, let's not forget about the plants because they are also living organisms. So we can also call, a group of um, plants or a kind of grass as a population if there are a lot of them, or uh, a group of flowers of the same kind, they are also a population. And then when you mix them with other several populations, such as the examples here in the screen, under community, then they can also be considered as a biotic community. Now, if we consider their interaction, this biotic community's interaction with the non-living environment or the non-living components, we call that one an ecosystem. So it already includes, the energy from the sun, the water, all of the elements and nutrients present in that particular location, plus, the role that they play in the biotic community, the interaction of these biotic community to um, between each other and in their non-living environment, that's ecosystem. They are functioning as one unit. Now, if we look at all of the ecosystem in a collective manner, like all of the living organisms interacting with each other in their non-living environment, that is what we call the biosphere. So, kumbaga, all of the ecosystem around the world is collectively known as the biosphere. Another common concept in ecosystem is the habitat and the niche. So habitat and niche are different concepts. When we say habitat, it's the specific place or a type of place where organisms or populations naturally live within the community. So, literally, kung asa nagpuyo ang isa ka organism. So, for example, us human beings, we have our address, no? We have our specific house or balay. Now, our niche is different. It's not a place. It's not somehow a place, but it is a role. An organism's obligatory role contributory to the total ecosystem function. So, for example, as human beings, we have our certain homes, certain place. Now, our niche would be different. So, although all of human beings, they have their certain habitat, lahi-lahi ang ato ang niche. So when we say niche, it's like your trabaho, your job. What is your job in the community that is actually contributory to the total ecosystem function? So, kunyari ako, as a teacher, my role is to teach you, the students. No? You as students, um, your role is also different from mine. So, meaning your niche is also different from my niche. So, when we are talking about organisms, so we have here an example, we can say that a habitat is the address, and the niche is the occupation. So take a look, for example, here sa baba. So we have habitat, which is the tree, kung asa nagpuyo. It's the particular place kung asa nagpuyo ang mga organisms. So this tree right here, habitat siya sa different organisms. Like we have the parrot, we have the bees, we have the squirrel. So same lang ilang habitat, no? They have the tree as their habitat, but their niche are different. So iba-iba ang kanilang role. Ang parrot, maybe the role of the parrot is to become prey for larger predators, no? That's why they need to reproduce. But dili lang ingana po diyang niche. It could also be that they also help in um, pollinating or germinating of seeds or whatever. So basta ang specific nila nga job or trabaho or role na gina-fulfill nila in an ecosystem. So for example, bees. So honeybees, the major role of honeybees or bees in general is to pollinate flowers. So mo gina siya ang ilahang kumbaga their niche. They are great pollinator of flowers, and nothing uh nothing more than that. Well, they do uh ano they make honeys so people to consume, but kana gid ang ilang pinaka major na job or role or niche, which is to pollinate flowers. Now ang squirrels naman, they also have their certain role in the ecosystem. So since nagakaon sila og nuts, they are good germinators, no? Or they help in germinating plants or seeds or nuts. So yeah, that's habitat and niche. The habitat is the specific place kung asa nagpuyo ang isa ka organism or where one organism lives, and the niche is its role. It's not a place, no, kung asa sila magkaon or whatever, but it's the role, kung ano yung ginagampanan or fulfill na role ng organism in an ecosystem. It could be the role of the prey or the role of the predator, or you know anything that can contribute to the ecosystem. I have already mentioned the biosphere a while ago. So biosphere is technically made up of parts of Earth where life exists, or meaning all of the ecosystem. No? So biosphere is also called as the zone of life on Earth. Now let's move on to the ecosystem structure. So when we say structure, this is a set of functional elements occupying a particular habitat and the relationships between the components. So ecosystem can be there are two ways to define the structure of the ecosystem. First is through its structural components, and second is through the trophic structure. So when we say structural components, we are talking about the biotic and the abiotic components of the ecosystem. And as we have mentioned a while ago, biotic means living, kasi bio means life. So all the living components such as the plants, animals, bacteria, fungi, so on and so forth, they are biotic components. Abiotic components, on the other hand, are non-living components. Kasi a is without, bio is life, so without life. Non-living components of the ecosystem. So included in this are the energy from the sun, the wind, the water, um, the minerals in rocks, the nutrients, the soil, and so on and so forth. Another way on how we can define an ecosystem is through its trophic structure. So when we say trophic structure, it is basically the food relationship of the structural components, like uh, kinsay mga nag-produce of food, who are the consumers of this food, and so on and so forth, and how do they interrelate in a life-sustaining food relational way. So let's focus first on the structural component. First, we have the abiotic factors. So again, if it's abiotic, it's non-living, anything that has no life at all. And when we say abiotic factors, these are um, these are what we call life support system. So abiotic factors are considered as life support system because if walang abiotic factors, how can the biotic community, or how can the living community survive? So asa man magkuha og energy ang living community? Even us, we use the energy from the sun. Asa man ta magkuhag water, no? Unsa atong inumon, unsa atong kaunon if we don't have the abiotic factors? Where will we get the nutrients that we need for us to grow? So that's why when we say abiotic, it's considered as life support system of the biotic components or the biotic community. Abiotic factors can also be limiting components or limiting factors of or in an ecosystem, in a sense that it actually limits the type of species or the specific species that can only live within a certain ecosystem or a certain place. Because say for example, if temperature is an example of abiotic, no? If it's too cold, if the temperature is too cold, say for example in North Pole, it's snowing there, no? Always cold. Usually wala jud sila sun. Naisan pero very very scarce. Dili kay sila kaayo makakuha og energy from the sun, no? So very cold ang North Pole. Then um the certain organisms lang na maka-survive dito is katulang pong well adapted to that climate or to that very cold freezing temperature, such as polar bears. So that's why it's a limiting factor because siguro di man siguro ito makakita og mga grizzly bears, no? Dito sa coldest part of the world. Same with ang polar bears dili pud mabuhi diri sa Philippines because um we have a rather warm and wet temperature here. So that's what we mean by abiotic factors actually limits the certain organism kung kinsa lang ang organism ang pwede mabuhi sa certain na ecosystem or certain place. Now, abiotic factors can be classified into two. It could be a resource and it could be a regulator. When we say it's a resource, um, it is a physical material, organic or inorganic, that is constantly altered or exchanged among organisms. So meaning kapag resource, it's actually taken in or ginagamit siya sa organisms and then i-exchange lang po to other organisms. Say for example, um, water. So when we drink water, we actually drink water, no? It's a resource. We drink water because we get nutrients from water. Do we get nutrients from water or like it's somehow it's needed by our body. So pag mainom tag water, ato alam po na siya i-excrete afterwards. No, mangihi ta or di kaya mag-sweat ta. So the water that we consume, the resource, that specific resource that we consume is actually altered and exchange among organisms. So, pag mangihi ka, mabalik na po na siya somewhere else, like sa soil or whatever. No? So, that's an example of resource. Let's remember that if it's a resource, it is something that is used, no? Or taken in by the organism. If it's a regulator, it is a condition in the environment. Kumbaga, what is the state of the environment? You do not um, consume it or you do not take a, a regulator, but it actually regulates the environment or it's a condition. Say for example, temperature. Now organisms will not eat temperature, or you do not really intake or you don't do not exchange temperature with other organisms, and that's how we know that it's not a resource but a regulator, because temperature regulates the environment. So katong example na to kaganina, pag init kaayo, lahi pod ng mga organisms ang naadara. Pag tugnaw kaayo, another set or lahi pod ng mga species of organisms ang pwede lang maka uh, survive in that particular place. So let's just think na kapag ka-resource ginagamit, kapag ka-regulator, it's not used at all, it's a condition of the environment. So sun, when we say sun, the energy from the sun, that's definitely a resource because organisms use energy from the sun, especially in photosynthesis, no? But when we say it's light intensity, kumbaga, unsa ka intense ang sun karong adlaw, or the level of humidity, the temperature, uh, that's already a regulator. Kasi kung unsa ka init ang sun, it will determine um, the organisms in that particular area. So it becomes a condition. Also similar with water. When we say water, that's definitely a resource kasi water is taken in and then exchanged to other organisms. But when we say level of precipitation, unsa ka daghana ang ulan karong adlaw or unsa ka kusga ang bundak sa ulan, that's already a condition of the environment. So it becomes a regulator. Level of altitude, that's definitely a regulator because you do not use that or take that, no? When we say oxygen, it's a resource because all of us, most organisms take in oxygen. But when we say oxygen concentration in a particular place, unsa ka concentrated, unsa ka concentrated of oxygen or the carbon dioxide ang particular place, that becomes a regulator now. So I hope you actually understand the difference between a resource and a regulator. Rock and minerals are definitely, they are resource because you use them. Another factor considered as abiotic is climate So climate is a notable regulating abiotic factor as well as natural disasters like typhoon, droughts, and fire. So abiotic factor gihapon sila because katong example na to kaganina, in the Philippines we have a tropical climate, di ba? Um we have wet and hot and warm seasons. And so we have a lot of rainforest in the Philippines because of our climate, because of our climatic condition. Now, in other parts, like against the North Pole or like kanang parts where there is tundra and taiga, so when you see tundra, kanang ice covered ang place, no? Covered with ice ang whole place. And and then they and thus they don't have rainforest there, but they have a different kind of forest like uh, I forgot, but it's I think like pine cone or something. So, some type of forest na nag-exist kapag so cold ang environment, no? So that's why we say that climate is a notable regulating abiotic factor at as well as mga natural disasters or natural phenomena, mga typhoon, drought, fire. So abiotic factors pud ni sila. So, biotic factors is what we call the living organisms that inhabit an environment. So, basta na kinabuhi, that's biotic factors. And biotic factors can be subdivided or categorized into three. We have the producers, consumers, and decomposers. And that leads us to the second way on how we can define our ecosystem is through trophic structure, which actually include the producer, consumer, and decomposers, no? So again, trophic structure, this is the food relationship between the structural components of the ecosystem, the biotic and the abiotic as well. So in this food relationship, there is always a transfer of matter and energy between organisms or between organisms and the physical environment. So just like pag ang plant gikaon sa goat, then the energy and the matter from the plant is transferred to the goat. And pag ang goat gikaon og snake, so this the same thing, the energy and the matter from the goat will be transferred to the snake and so on and so forth. Okay? And the trophic structure is defined by organisms classification based on their general nutritional habits. So kung sa ilahang mga ginakaon. First, we have the producers. I'm sure you are familiar with producer, consumer, and decomposer. So when we say producer, these are also called as autotrophs. When we say autotrophs, it means they are self-feeders. Self-feeders mean these organisms actually make or manufacture their own food or their own organic compounds as the source of energy and nutrients. But it's the food that they manufacture is not only for themselves but also for other organisms. So at the trophic level or at trophic structure, sila ang pinaka nasa baba, no? As you can see here, we have producers, and then of course producers will be eaten by primary consumers, and then consumers will be eaten by secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, and so on and so forth. So producers, most of the producers are green plants that make organic nutrients by transforming the energy from the sun into chemical energy or chemical bound um, energy and nutrients through the process of photosynthesis. And I'm sure we're very familiar with photosynthesis. These are kumbaga major process in the ecosystem wherein gina-carry out siya sa mga plants so that they can make their own food and they can also make food for other organisms. But we also have a term chemosynthesis, and this is a process that is somewhat similar. Actually, this is similar to photosynthesis. It's just that there is an absence of sunlight. So for those organisms living in dark areas or areas where sunlight cannot reach them, they instead of doing photosynthetic process, they do chemosynthesis or they undergo chemosynthesis. This is still turning say for example an inorganic compound into organic compound, or through organic nutrients that can be consumed by other organisms but without the help of the sunlight. Instead, ang chemosynthesis, instead of using the energy from the sun, it uses, or bacteria that does chemosynthesis use chemical energy, no? So some producer, mostly special, can extract inorganic compounds from their environment and convert them to organic nutrients in the absence of sunlight in a process called chemosynthesis. So instead of solar energy, ang gagamitin ng mga specialized bacteria is chemical energy. So that's chemosynthesis. So kaning mga nagabuhat og chemosynthesis, we call them chemosynthetic autotrophs. They are microorganisms living in dark areas where light does not reach. And natin mga examples for them, we have Nitrosomonas. That's an example of nitrogen, nitrifying bacteria nga nagalive sa soil and then fixes nitrogen or fixes ammonia and turns it into other usable forms of nitrogen such as nitrates and nitrites. We also have ferrooxidants. Kani mga ferrooxidants, they live. These are types of bacteria that oxidizes iron and so on and so forth. Daghan pa tag example for them, no, but yeah. Next is we have the consumers, and all of us are familiar also with consumers. So consumer is also called heterotrophs or other feeders. These are organisms that do not make their own food, but they get their nutrients and energy they require by feeding either directly or indirectly on producers. So mga consumers, it's either magkaon sila directly sa producers or they also eat their co-consumers. So consumers are divided into three. We have uh, herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. When we say herbivores, from the term herbivores, these are the consumers that only eat plant. So plant lang ilahang kaunan. They directly feed on producers. When we say carnivores, there are different types, no, of carnivores, like primary carnivores and then so on and so forth. But let's just have the general carnivore. Kani mga carnivore, they eat only meat. So, contrary to herbivores na plant lang, carnivores eat only meat. Now, tertiary and higher level consumers, or we call them in general as omnivores, they eat both plant and meat. Okay? So we have here an example. Kapag carnivore, they eat meat, herbivore plants, omnivore, which human beings belong, we eat plants and animals, or plants and meat. Okay, so let's move on to decomposers. So decomposers are a group of organisms that break down decaying organic matter. And I believe we are familiar already with decomposers. Kapag decomposers, these are organisms that break down dead organic matter in the environment. They are actually very crucial in the environment because sila tong break down of complex matter in the organic in the um, in an ecosystem. So, di ba producers, they are responsible for the build up of organic materials since they convert inorganic to organic nutrients. So, kaning mga decomposers, sila tong tiguba. Not really nga ginaguba nila, but they do that. They break complex structures so that these complex structure will be simplified again, and then ang mga compounds, so yung mga elements in a compounds can be broken down, and then these can be used again by the producers to continue the cycle of life, no? So when we say decomposers, the general term for them is decomposers, but we can classify them. There are different types of decomposers. We have the saprotrophs, which is the major decomposers, and or saprophytes. They are not um, commonly called saprotrophs or saprophytes. They're just called decomposers. But for the sake of um, specificity, or like specific dapat ano, so let's call them saprotrophs or saprophytes. We also have detritivores. They are a type of decomposers na somehow makalimtan usahay nga decomposers po ay sila. So we also have scavengers, which we will learn later on. So ang pinagkaiba nitong saprotrophs or saprophytes with detritivores is their mode of nutrition, how they break down things. When we say saprotrophs or saprophytes, they are bacteria and fungi. Sila gid ning bacteria and fungi lang gid ni sila, ang mga saprotrophs, and they are the major decomposers of uh, the world, the ecosystems. So they do not eat their food. Dili nila kaunan nilang food, but they decompose it externally. So external meaning dili kaunon internally. So externally by secreting digestive enzymes and absorbing the nutrients. So what do they do is, say for example na fungi in a log, or it's log, wood, no? Dead log. So pag naay fungi dara, instead of fungi eating the log themselves, but what they do is they secrete digestive enzymes, meaning nagapagawa sila digestive enzymes sa ilang body, and pag nagasecrete sila ana mapadulong sa dead log, and then kadugayan ang log malata. Okay, so ma-decompose. That's the time when they will actually absorb the nutrients from the log nga already nalata, na decompose na. So that's the mode of nutrition for saprotrophs. Detritivores, on the other hand, they consume, they ingest the materials to break it down and get the nutrients. So, dili external ang ilahang pag-decompose. It's internally. Say, for example, worms. So, ang mga worms, kinakaon niya gyud ang dead organic matter. Or say, for example, kikaon niya ang dead leaves. And then, ang kanang leaves, dito pa na sa tiyan sa worm ma-decompose. And then, pag excrete ana sa worm, that's already the decomposed product. So, that's the difference between the detritivores and saprotrophs. It's the mode of nutrition, how they decompose their materials. Okay. So, let's compare them side by side. So, kaning detritivores, kasi sometimes na nakakalimutan siya as ay decomposer po di ay ning mga detritivores. So, ang detritivores, these are organisms that feed on the dead and decomposing organic matter by oral ingestion. So, meaning ginakaon sa tiyan na decompose. Okay? They are a type of decomposers. They break the organic material through oral digestion. And ang example, pinaka-example for these, for the detritivores are beetles, flies, mites, slugs, ano pa ni? Nails, di ka na maklaro class. Earthworms, millipedes, crabs, sea stars, woodlice, and etc. So, mo na mga detritivores kaunon sa daan o sa nila ma-decompose. Now, decomposers, on the other hand, is a general term that encompasses the detritivores, the saprophytes, and the scavengers. So, kaning, di ba, yung taganina, pag saprotrophs or saprophytes, these are bacteria and fungi, and external ang ilang pag-digest. Magpagawas lang sila og digestive enzyme from their body, and then hulaton lang nila nga malata ang dead organic matter or material, usa nila i-absorb ang nutrient on a cellular level. Now, scavengers are also a type of decomposers. So, ang kaning mga scavengers, these are dali lang ni nato sila ma-recognize because they are a type of decomposers that eat feces or eat manure, mga tae, kautae ba. So, examples for this are, asa naman to? We have cockroach, we have flies, we have wasps, So mo na siya example sa mga scavengers. So ang mga tae ilaha pag yung i-further breakdown pag nila no ang mga tae. So yeah, those are decomposers. And by the way, many of the decomposition byproducts are not absorbed as food by decomposers. There are organic materials which are recycled back to the producers. So dili tanan gina-decompose sa mga decomposers ilahang ginagamit for their nutrition. Just like murag sa plants ra pud no, inga na gihapon dili tanan nga food nga ilang himuon para sa ilaha. It it is also intended for other organisms. So decomposers, uh, the dead organic materials that they break down is also not only for them. They will not use all of the nutrients, but most of these nutrients are recycled back to the producers so that life will continue. So yeah, that's the trophic level. No, we have the producers at the very bottom, which are the food produce the food tighatag of food. We have consumers on top of them, different levels of consumers. And as you can see, there's actually no decomposers on the trophic level. It's because they are actually everywhere, no? On different levels. Pag ang plant mamatay, ma-decompose. Pag ang primary consumers mamatay, ma-decompose. Pag ang secondary, tertiary components mamatay, they will be decomposed. So it's, decomposers are everywhere. Here is a schematic representation of the structure of an ecosystem. So, kumbaga, the summary of what we have tackled thus far. So, we have here an ecosystem. Again, when we say ecosystem, it's a functional unit of the interaction. That's our keyword there, the interaction of non-living and the living components. So, we can divide the structure of an ecosystem into two. We have abiotic, the non-living, and the biotic, which is the living component. Abiotic can be further divided into as a resource or a regulator, and we have here examples of them. Biotic, on the other hand, can be divided or categorized as producers, consumers, and decomposers. And while consumers can be further classified as herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. The next topic is on ecosystem functions, but this will be tackled on the next video. So I hope you learn and watch the video lecture that I have prepared for you. Thank you. Bye.